friendly neighborhood bodybuilder and comic book collector, and the host of the Go Collect Speculation video. In this episode, we are going to spend some time talking about 6 blog posts that have been sent in to Go Collect. This first blogger does something that I think is really cool. This second blog post is actually near and dear to my heart. So this next blog post is right up my alley. I want to play a game. The MCU has done some pretty interesting things, right? The folks over at Go Collect, it was all about more than meeting the eye. You could potentially get ahead of the curve, and we all know that Marvel is going to do something with Daredevil. While we are on this topic of Spider-Man, we have to acknowledge the elephant that is in the room, and the elephant is Miles Morales, a 3.5 sold. So there you have it. We have reached the end of another Go Collect weekly recap. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and we'll tune in.
Hi, and welcome everyone to Wizard World Virtual Experiences. I'm Jerry Milani, and today I have the unique pleasure to introduce to you and to speak with a musician, an actor, a producer, everything you can possibly do, director, everything you can do in the world of entertainment. This gentleman has done it, and we'll get to that in just a minute. I want to remind you, if you're watching on Twitch or on Facebook or on YouTube, all of our channels running simultaneously, go on ahead, and if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat room. You guys can interact with each other in the chat as well. Our folks will pick the best ones, get them to me. We'll get to as many of those questions as we can over the next 45 minutes. But I want to appreciate everyone joining with us today, whether you're watching live or on recording to today's Wizard World Virtual Experiences panel. And remind everyone that in addition to the free Q&A, you have an opportunity for live video chats with our guests. Those will be coming up on Thursday. So anytime between now and Thursday, you can go to wizardworldvirtual.com, learn more about the other offerings we have, as well as the upcoming schedule we have. So the live video chats, the autographs, the recorded videos, all for this guest and for other guests coming up. You can learn about all those at wizardworldvirtual.com. Coming up this week on Wizard World Virtual, we have a ton of great panels for you in a variety of different, not just celebrities, but a variety of different areas that we like to enjoy at our Wizard World shows, and we're expanding a little bit and doing some of those things right here on the virtual as well. Tuesday, we have Vampire Diaries, followed later by Blake Jameson, who's a pop culture artist who I think you'll really enjoy learning more about. Thursday, just announced, we're going to have guests from The Nanny, including Fran Drescher, the star of the show. So that's going to be a lot of fun on Thursday. We have Whiz Quiz coming up Thursday evening, which is a fun, nerdy trivia quiz. Also on Friday, the X-Men animated series. We'll have guests from that, some of the voice actors and an artist and writer from that, as well as Kato Roki. Kato Kalin is back with his famous Kato Roki we'll do on Friday night. And then Saturday, we have guests from the Lego Masters reality TV. So just about everything represented. And you want to talk about everything being represented in one person. Today's guest starred as a child actor in Circus Boy at age 11 on television. He gained fame then as a version of himself in The Monkees. He later, that actually led to a famous rock band, which was The Monkees. They formed as a TV show and turned into an actual real-life rock band, and that's led to a 50-year career in music for this guest. He's also a film, stage, and music producer, director, and a frequent guest at Wizard World shows. Here is the great Micky Dolenz.
Boom, here I come.
Here you come.
Walking down the street. The virtual street, right?
Micky, welcome back to Wizard World.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure
to be back.
It's a pleasure to see you again. As I mentioned, you're a frequent Wizard World guest, and we were talking before we got on as to, we've been doing these Wizard World virtual experiences for a while and trying to bring the things that we do at our show into the virtual, and you're one of the folks who really brought music to our show. So we really appreciate you being a part of Wizard World for all these years.
Yeah, that's cool. I have a great time at those conventions. It's and I'll be honest. I started rather late doing them. Only a few years ago, and I wasn't sure how I'd like it. And it turns out I really liked it a lot. It was really great to get in touch with those people, one-on-one, and I kind of think of it, well, they are a convention, And I kind of think of it as a convention where you're meeting your wholesalers. You're meeting people in your industry that then hopefully they go out and promote and you know, sponsor you or whatever. Yeah, so it's been pretty good. I must say, I love this fact that I didn't have to get on an airplane and check into a hotel and eat, lousy cheese whiz tacos.
Well, not only that, but folks who never have a chance to meet you because
Right.
they live in places like Idaho, Connecticut, Florida, Charlotte, North Carolina. And the reason I'm bringing these places up, these are folks of South Africa, Tennessee, Hawaii,
Oh, wow.
Georgia. These is Houston. These are where people are in the chat room right now telling us where they're from. So
Cool.
they're all getting this chance to meet you and to hopefully interact. If they have some questions, folks, and all of those, please ask them. We'd definitely like to get to as many of those as possible. I want to start though, Micky. Most folks know you for what they see behind, but you started in this business as a child actor in a series called Circus Boy. Tell us about Circus Boy, how that got started. I know you mentioned in your book kind of how it happened to kind of how you got going in it, but tell us about getting into showbiz and what this series meant to you.
Well, simply, my parents were in showbiz. So I came from a showbiz family. I was born into the business. I kind of followed it in my father's footsteps, essentially. And at one point, I guess, his agent, called and said, listen, I heard about this show that is being cast. Would Micky want to go up for an audition? I think I'd been up for a couple of auditions before that, but my parents never were like pushy. They were never the typical stage mom, eyes and teeth, honey, eyes and teeth. Nothing like that. And I do remember my mom saying, there's an audition for a series. Would you like to do it? And I said, no, I got a baseball game. But I changed my mind, I guess. I don't remember why. And I went up and Circus Boy was my first series. I think I'd done a couple of little things before that. I actually have some prenatal work coming out on ultrasound.
So we go all the way back.
Oh, way back.
We go all the way back to prenatal, which is always
with a
good.
Top hat and a cane,
So the other star.
That's the simple answer is I was born into a showbiz family.
Now, the other star in that series was Noah Beery Jr., who folks might know if they watch the Rockford Files. He played Rocky, the father. How was working with him, and was he a mentor to you? How was that relationship?
Wonderful. He was wonderful, very kind, gentle man. But everybody on the show, Robert Lowry, Big Boy Williams, everybody on the show was really, really great. And I'm not sure what about mentor. That would have been more my father and my mom, who my mom did have to come on the set because that was the law at the time. I think still is, as a support. But everybody on the show was absolutely wonderful.
Now, in that series,
and the elephant, you can't forget the elephant.
Bimbo, there's Bimbo, right? That's Bimbo 1.
Yeah, Bimbo. Yeah, Bimbo.
It was a Bimbo 2.
Yeah, because he got too big, turned into for the second season. So they had to get a new little Bimbo the elephant. And I think a lot of people know this, but my first gig as a performer on stage live, singing, was in Kennywood Park in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's a big amusement park. I was on a press junket to promote the show, Circus Boy, with my dad. And they said, can you do anything on stage? I said, well, I play guitar a little bit. So I learned a couple of songs. And they had a little trio there playing the songs. And I came out and I sang like Purple People Eater. I'm going to sit right down, write myself a letter, and Wooly Bully or something on my little acoustic guitar with this little band. And then I introduced the elephant, who came out with his trainer and did elephant circus things, And I would stand under his feet and, all that. So basically, my first gig was opening for
So
an elephant.
is that where you caught the music bug? Because without the music bug, without showing some talent as a musician and an actor, and we'll get to the process later of how you got to the Monkees, do you credit that for kind of getting you interested in music?
No, it got me a therapist. Opening for an elephant can really.
We were going to give Bimbo so much credit just now.
Later in life, that can really be. No. Well, I was my first instrument of choice was classical guitar, acoustic nylon string, Segovia kind of stuff. I was 10 years old, just a kid, but I really loved it. And my dad had got me into it. So I was taking lessons. And then when I went to I was in school, back in school after Circus Boy, I would go to parties and they would invite me because I could play the guitar, but I would play like Malagueña or something. And I remember the girl saying, any Kingston Trio? And I was like, I'll be right back. And I came back, hang down your head, dum dooley. And then that got me into folk music, late 50s, early 60s. I started doing folk music, and then that morphed eventually into rock and roll. But acoustic rhythm I would play. Like my audition piece for the Monkees, for instance, was Johnny B. Good, Chuck Berry, on guitar.
So how much of the audition was the acting part and how much was the music part? Because they're inextricably linked in the show. You have to have the at least the singing at first. How much of that was needed to be both?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't think I've ever been asked that question in that way. And it's a really good question. If you think about the Monkees as musical theater, as Broadway, that really sets the tone. I mean, that really puts it in the proper perspective. The auditions were probably pretty equal, as you would if you were auditioning for a Broadway show. You would have to do acting and singing and dancing. And dancing wasn't part of the Monkee audition, but everything else was, including improv and as you say, there was acting, a scene study, as we call it. You learned a scene and they put it on film. Music, my audition piece was Johnny B. Good, which included singing and playing. You had to be able to sing and play some instrument to get through the auditions. And then the scene study, which is, you can find that stuff. I've seen that stuff around, the original audition pieces, improvisation and interviews and stuff. So it was a combination of a lot of things, but fairly equally balanced.
The show lasted 58 episodes, but it still endures 50 plus years later. People still talk about it. Part of it, I think, is the success of the music. 50 years later, you can still listen to it and enjoy it. But what makes the Monkees, even though it was only around for a couple of years, something that people still think about and talk about more than a lot of other shows that were on in the 60s? Almost any other show that was on in the 60s.
Again, good question. But I just want to make a point. Yeah, the show only ran 2 seasons in 66 and 67. But each season, it was 26 episodes, which was typical at the time for shows. Today, that would translate into about a 7-year run, because now you only get 8 episodes a year, if that, sometimes. So the Monkees today would have run for at least 7 years, the equivalent of 7 years, maybe more. The answer to your question, and I do get asked this a lot. I don't think you can break these things down in any kind of scientific sense, like reductionist. You can't take it apart and examine it and say, oh, well, it was the music, or oh, well, it was the acting. Oh, no, it was the comedy. It was the sets. It was you can't do that with any show or any movie or anything. You can't take apart like Star Trek and say, oh well, it was just William Shatner, or it was just the writing or the special effects. It was just Leonard Nimoy. What I'll often say is that the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. And that's when the magic happens. One of the producers was asked not long ago, a number of years ago, but relatively speaking, what do you think was the success of the Monkees? And he said, we just caught lightning in a bottle. And that is kind of the way I look at it. I feel blessed to have been in that bottle, really, and blessed that they cast me in it. And because obviously it's been a pretty nice ride, but I don't think you can take it down and take it apart. You can't take it apart and say it was one thing or the other. Yes, of course it was the music and the songwriters. I mean, you look at the songwriters, Boyce and Hart and Carole King and Jerry Goffin and
Neil Diamond
and Paul Williams and David Gates and incredible writers on the television show, and incredible directors and producers, and us, obviously the four of us getting cast in those parts. So again, if you think of the Monkees as this, and it was actually John Lennon who made the comparison in the 60s, the Monkees are like the Marx Brothers, terrible accent there, sorry, but and he was absolutely right. And we the producers screened Marx Brothers movies for us at the time. And that was the kind of the heart of it, because ultimately the Monkees was not like the American answer to the Beatles, which everybody, touts, fake news. It was a television show. It wasn't a group. It was a television show about a group. It was about this imaginary group that wanted to be the Beatles. We had a poster of the Beatles on the set, and we threw darts at it. And that's what the show was about, this group that wanted to be famous. And on the show, it's an important point, we never made it on the television show. It was the struggle for success that I think is what helped endear it to, people all over the world who were there trying to do the same thing in their living rooms, in their basements, their garages, rehearsing and playing and trying to do the same thing. And we sort of spoke to that.
It was the struggle and the zany situations and the crazy, but what was filming like? I mean, here's four guys. None of you knew any of each other before,
no.
Correct?
No.
So, and all of a sudden you're in there, and now you've got to be best buddies and best friends, and you're playing yourselves, but it's a version of yourselves. It's clearly not yourselves. What was filming like? What was it like going on set? And I know there was some improv. What was it like filming this series?
Well, I can only speak for myself. I approached it as, an actor / musician entertainer. I mean, this was my second series at the same studio. When I pulled in to the guard gate for, the first day of filming, it was the same guy at the gate that had been there when I was doing Circus Boy. He said, "Hey, Micky, how you doing? You got another show, huh? Cool." It was only 10 years later, which now at my age, 10 years is nothing. It's like the blink of an eye. It was only 10 years. I was 10 in Circus Boy, and I was 20 in the Monkees. So to me, it was just like, got another show. Yes, I met the guys. I recognized Davey because I think we had a lot in common in the audition process and the filming and stuff, because we'd both had careers as child stars, and we'd both been in the business and stuff. And so I remember David. I didn't remember Mike or Peter from the auditions. Really 16, people or something like that. But one morning we went to I was called in. My call time was whatever, and I went in for a wardrobe fitting because that's always the first thing that you do because that takes the longest for them to get organized. A wardrobe fitting, and I remembered that it was one of the producers saying, "Hi, Micky, this is Mike. Mike, this is Micky. This is Peter and David. Hi, how you doing? Nice to meet you. You guys are the Monkees." And that was it. And we went in for a wardrobe fitting for the pilot. And but I was quite used to all this. And I didn't even quit school. I was in school, as you probably know from my book, studying to be an architect. I didn't even quit school for the pilot. I just took about 10 days off because I knew that pilots, most did not sell. It was quite, one out of, I don't know what it was, 1 out of 10 or 20 maybe. So I didn't even quit school. But when the pilot sold, I did. And we started production, a few months later. And the filming, remember that because the producers, for whatever reason, had picked the four of us, and a lot of it, I can imagine what was going through their minds when they were watching us and watching the film and going through that audition interview process. They were looking for not only you had to be able to do the stuff, the talent and the acting and the singing and the playing, but they were looking for that camaraderie. They were looking for that je ne sais quoi, that thing that we all look for as producers, directors when we're casting, that you get some kind of chemistry going between the cast members of your show. I mean, if you can get that hopefully going, it adds another level of this undefinable thing. So I can imagine that they were looking for that. And so I remember from the get-go, day one, I was very comfortable on a set, of course, because I'd spent a lot of my life on a TV set, and we just really clicked comedically, and I'm sure that is what also they were looking for. We didn't step on each other's toes like the Marx Brothers were very distinct characters, or others, even like Monty Python and all these ensemble, groups of people. They all tend to be distinct, and that's one of the attractions. That's one of the things that makes them successful, is that they have all defined, really defined characters that don't. So right from the get-go, we were like clicking, and even by the second or third episode, we were like saying, "Oh, that line in the script is not a Micky line. That's a Peter line, and that's a Mike line, and this is Davey." Because they had encouraged us, in fact, trained us to be improvisational. That was a very important part of the paradigm, I guess. Very unusual at the time, because you did not improvise on a set of a television show or movie. Very unusual to do that. You learned your lines, you came in, you read the lines, you went home. But they actually brought in a guy named James Frawley, who went on to win an Emmy for the show, and then other Emmys, like for the pilot of Ally McBeal. And he was an improv guy from Second City with Mike Nichols and Elaine May, passed away recently, unfortunately. And he came in early days, and we started improv training. We started, the exercises, throwing the imaginary ball back and forth, and doing these, okay, you're a sea captain, and Nesmith is your cabin boy, and and you're at sea and you're lost. And I actually found that very difficult, and I do to this day, to improv, because I wasn't brought up like that. I was brought up, with that more old school traditional thing. So for me, the improv side of it, I got better at it. Nez was great all the time, and he just like fell into it big time. And but I followed his lead, and a lot of that stuff on the show was. But in answer to your question, the long answer, it was really intense. It was exciting, intense, funny, crazy, very unusual at the time. The atmosphere on the set, everybody was very young compared to your more traditional old school. Even the audition Am I rambling on a bit too much here?
No, that's what this is about. This is you're
Oh, okay.
supposed to be totally good.
Even my first, even my first audition, I have talked about this before. My first interview, my agent said, you got an interview for a TV show, and I was in school, and I said, okay, and I went down and walked in, same studio as Circus Boy, probably the same office for the interview, and I walked in. I had the script, which I still have. It was spelled monkeys with a Y. Excuse me. It was spelled monkeys with a Y until some legal, somebody in business affairs says you're never going to be able to trademark that. And I walked in, learned my lines from my scene and walked in, and there was a couple of guys sitting there and wearing jeans and t-shirts and eating pizza and, drinking coffee. I thought they were there for the audition because they weren't much older than I was. And those were the producers and creators of the show, Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider. So already I could sense that this was different. This is because usually you went into an interview and there was a guy in a suit smoking a cigar and saying, like Peter used to say, we want to do a show that kids will like, But these guys, Bob and Bert, were not much older than I was, and so it was different right from the get-go, and especially this idea of improv and spontaneity and stuff. And I think that did have a lot to do with what kids especially responded to. It spoke to that spirit of that time too.
Fans, whether you're watching on Twitch or Facebook or YouTube, go ahead and put in some questions. We've got a lot of good ones already. We're going to get to a few of those right now. But
is anybody watching?
A whole bunch of people are watching. A lot of questions. We've got a lot coming in. If you're interested in the live video chats or the autographs or the recorded videos, go to wizardworldvirtual.com, and we'll be doing those live video chats on Thursday. So you have a couple of days, but go in there right away and sign up for that. Because if you think this is fun, wait till you see being a couple of minutes with Micky on the private chat. Alan asks, Micky, I'd like to know about how you trained your voice for Broadway. We haven't gotten to your Broadway yet. And do you feel that training has really kept your voice so strong now that you've continued your career 50 years later?
Absolutely. Great question. Wow. You're asking some great questions. You should think about taking this up professionally.
Alan Williams gets all the credit for this question.
It's I don't know. It's a bit of a long story. I'd never trained when I was young, but having said that, there was always music in the house. My mom and dad, as I mentioned, were singers, actors. My father would wander around the living room in his underwear singing Some Enchanted Evening for an audition, in the 50s. My mom sang and played piano, and always music around the house, and radio music and records and stuff. And my mom taught my sister and I how to sing, do harmonies at like 8 years old. So I was always singing. And I believe there's a little bit of nature and nurture, in that equation. Like if you were, they talk about people being born with like or having a golfer's physique. Or you're 7'6", so you're probably a good bet to maybe go out for the NBA. So there's a physicality to that and to singing, because your vocal cords are little muscles, and either they're kind of designed, I guess, for singing or not, and so that helps. So that's the nature part. And then there's the nurture. I mean, if your parents or your friends or your school or somebody detects, oh, you may have a talent for singing, then maybe they nurture that. So there's a bit of that too. I remember well into the Monkees, like, we had a lot of hit records, and living the life. And my mom came down to visit me and came to a recording session, and I was recording another Neil Diamond tune probably or whatever. And she took me aside after, and because she was a trained singer. She had trained as a singer in the big band era. And she said, you might want to think about taking some singing and breathing lessons. And I said something really stupid like, Mom, I just sold 65 million records. But little did I know, because when you're young at that age, there's not a lot of damage you can do, but you can do damage. And it would be like a tennis player that is ready to go out and play the finals at Wimbledon and doesn't warm up, doesn't practice, doesn't warm up, goes out on the court cold, and just, that would be stupid. Nobody would do that. And so that's kind of how I look at it is, you got to keep those muscles trained and loose and stretched and warm and all that. So I didn't do any training until my manager said, you have an audition for a Broadway musical. I'd done a little bit in musical theater, but not a lot, and not as extensive as this. It was for Aida, the Elton John, Tim Rice musical. And I was the bad guy, and I had these 2 or 3 songs that were big songs. They were, these full voice, not arias, but that Elton John kind of Tim Rice, rock musical kind of thing. But it was big notes. Had to hit a B flat every night, wailing it, and I could do that. But my manager said, 8 shows a week. You got to think about that. And I said, hey, I've done 8 shows and traveled 400 miles between each one, but it is different, and it was different, so fortunately, I went to, I did go, and I said, okay, I'll go. And I went in, and, I didn't know what to expect. It was a big vocal coach out here in Los Angeles, a guy named Eric Vitro, who's just amazing and one of the premier vocal coaches. And I walked in, and the first thing I said is, I don't want to sound like Mario Lanza. And he laughed. He said, everybody says that. I actually told that joke once, that story rather, I told that story to Paul McCartney once, and he said, you should be so lucky, which is true. Anyway, I didn't understand what it was all about. It was about breathing, and it was about protecting your vocal cords, caring for them like you would your arm if you were a baseball player or a tennis player or a whatever. And that's what it's about. It's almost more about protection and warming up and training. And thank goodness I did. And yes, again, long answer to your question, it has helped enormously after that, because, I ain't getting any younger. And now I'm very cognizant and very careful to warm up especially if I'm not feeling well, or if it's cold, or I haven't sung in a long time, or it's dry like Vegas or Tahoe or something. You got to be careful, because once you do some kind of damage, it can be irreversible. And so yes, it has helped a lot over the years.
That's great. Another question from our audience. Tracy Dunn McDermott wants to know that she says a lot of performers don't like to watch themselves. Do you ever go back and watch the Monkees episodes?
I hate watching myself. I absolutely hate it. I mean, there's a little picture of me here in the corner down here, my, what you're saying. I look at it and I go, oh, God. No, I hate watching myself. Notoriously, I never watch things I've done. And I think over the years, I've wondered why, and people have asked me why. And I think it's because I don't want to get self-conscious about it. I don't want to get to the point where I'm trying to pick apart a performance or an interview or something, and oh God, I wish I hadn't said that, and oh God, I wish I'd have wore my hat a different way, or I'd put on a different shirt, or oh God, I wish I hadn't, you know, saying that, because boy, you get down that rabbit hole and you're lost. Then that therein lies, what's that thing? There be monsters. Don't go there. Don't go there.
Another great question from Lucy Hernandez wants to know what your thoughts are on a Broadway musical based on the Monkees.
Oh, people have been talking about that for years and years, decades probably. It does seem like an obvious thing, and I've talked to people, and I have, I've done a lot of Broadway. There's a lot of challenges when you do that. A musical is a very, very different kettle of fish than a scripted television show or movie or concert. I certainly would not want to be involved in a kind of a jukebox musical, what they disparagingly call jukebox musicals, just to go out there and sing the songs. Just very seldom do those work for very long. So no, I wouldn't want to do that. But I'm game. I'm open to suggestions. But yes, there has been talks about it, on and off for years.
A question from at Rear Naked Choke wants to know, have you seen the Laurel Canyon documentary on Epics? And what are your thoughts on the Laurel Canyon scene back in the 60s and 70s?
Well, the new Laurel Canyon Epic one is, I've heard, and I have not watched the entire thing, because again, I don't like to watch myself. But then again, I was there, so I kind of know what was going on. And I did see a few little bits of it, especially the stuff with my dear friend Henry Diltz, who kind of takes you through that entire, and I knew him from that time. I understand it's got nominated for an Emmy. Yeah, so it's a wonderful documentary, I understand. And I was there doing it, and I could tell that these people that produced it, they really, really did a good job, and they had a real affection and love and interest in that period. And I can tell you, I've done some other interviews for other documentaries about that period and that time. Some have been brilliant stuff. Tina Mala, they did a wonderful documentary, Eye on LA here in Los Angeles. That was one of the best. And then there's been some others that, you could tell they were just kind of exploitive, and they didn't do very well. But this Epic one, was really great, what I saw and what I heard. And, the thing is, from my point of view, again, I can only speak for myself, it wasn't that big a deal back in 65, 66, 67. It was just people in the business, the same business, hanging out. And it was a very small, group of people. If I don't know what the numbers were, but if you were to add up all the numbers of the people that were, in that ilk of performers and singers and musicians at the time, it wasn't that many people. It was a very fringe experience, a very fringe element of society and of entertainment, even. And that was a big surprise. The Monkees even got on the air, and the producers told me, they said, "Boy, it nearly didn't." The networks, and there was only 3 at the time, they were scared to death of putting anything about young people on television, because usually the only time you saw kids with long hair and bell bottoms on television is they were getting arrested. So all of a sudden have these long-haired weirdos on television, as the Monkees, it was I can imagine it was, and the producers told me it was a tough sell, you know, but they did get it on, obviously, they got it on the air. And the kids then, you know, were able to go to their parents and say, see, the monkeys have long hair and they're not committing crimes against nature. It's okay. It's funny because over the years, you know, there have been other similar, you know, zeitgeist juxtaposition kind of things, like for instance, Happy Days, where Henry and as the Fonz made it okay to wear a leather jacket and ride a motorcycle. Because up till then, it was Marlon Brando as a Hell's Angel, you know, that kind of thing. And he made it okay. Hey, he's a nice guy and he wears a leather jacket and he rides a motorcycle. And then Will Smith did the same thing to young black rap music in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It's okay to sing that kind of music and to wear those clothes and stuff. You see, and the Monkees, of course, to some degree, I think, did that in '66.
You mentioned the Fonz. You were up for that as well. You were in the group that was being considered, yes, for.
I believe it was down to the last two, me and Henry, because that's what he says, and we talked about it later. I frankly don't remember him at the time. That was like late '60s, early '70s, something like that. And but I do remember going to the audition, and Henry told me years later. He says, you know, I remember you, and when I went in for this final callback, he said, I saw you sitting there, and I thought, oh crap, Micky Dolenz is here. I'll never get it. But thank goodness that he did. He was at the Fonz and is the Fonz, and he did a much more appropriate job than I would have done as the Fonz. He was perfect for it, absolutely perfect.
Well, he's a Wizard World favorite as well.
Sorry?
He's a Wizard World favorite of ours also. He's been to a lot of our shows.
Oh yeah, we became good friends, and you know, we bumped into each other all the time. Yeah, he was great.
Another question from @Am Pst Comms wants to know, first says, Micky, I would like to say that you've always been my favorite monkey. And the question is, you were once on the reality show Gone Country, hosted by John Rich, and you sang a song called Country in Me that this guest says they love. Have you ever thought of making a country album?
I have, actually. And I think, you know, record companies and producers and people kind of go, Micky Dolenz country album? I don't know, because they're looking at, of course, from a marketing point of view. Having said that, it is quite ironic because my mom was from Austin, Texas, and so I grew up with heavy country influences. The Sons of the Pioneers, Tennessee Ernie Ford, you know, a lot of heavy country, because she would play those records. The earliest records I remember having was 16 Tons by Tennessee Ernie Ford. It wasn't my record, it was hers. And like I say, Sons of the Pioneers. So I grew up with a lot of that influence, and it carried over because eventually the Everly Brothers, I was a huge fan of the Everly Brothers and that country harmony, that first and third, you know, country harmony. And then when I started doing the Monkees, Mike Nesmith, who came from Dallas, Texas, of course, he also had and still does has a country, you know, influence, or he was influenced, obviously, and he has that country feel in a lot of what he does. And I think it's one of the reasons that we got along and blended so well, you know, vocally to this day. And the album that we have out now called The Mike and Micky Show, the Monkees present The Mike and Micky Show, because we always had that really great blend. And I don't know, maybe the producers also heard that. It was one of the reasons that they cast us. I call it the Everly Monkees, you know. So I'd love to do a country album. Anybody out there that wants to fund a country album? Micky Dolenz Goes Country. I had a great time doing that show with John Rich, and I thought about releasing that song as a single, actually.
Well, now when you did the first two albums, they were not your music, and then you guys were able to.
Well, Mike, sorry to interrupt you.
Away.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but on the first two albums, Mike Nesmith did write and play a few songs on those.
Okay, good.
Albums. I had not, but
sure. Now that makes
keep
sense.
the record straight, you know. And you know, the thing is, we all wanted to, especially Mike and especially Peter. Peter tells the story of going into the an early recording session, and with his bass guitar. And somebody said, one of the producers said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well," I said, "What?" So Mike and Peter especially always, right from the get-go, wanted to, because they'd been told, especially Nez, it's going to be some of your music. It is going to be, because he had auditioned as a musician, singer, not as much of an actor, because that's not what he did. And he tells the story of going in the early days and playing one of his very first songs he wrote, and playing it for the producers of the music. And they said, "That's nice, but it's not a monkey song." And he said, "Well, wait a minute. I am one of the monkeys."
What is a monkey song?
Yeah, right. And they said, "Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. But no, thank you. It's not a monkey song." And so he said, "Okay." And he went and he gave it to an unknown at the time, an unknown girl singer kicking around Los Angeles. Her name was Linda Ronstadt, and that song was Different Drum. So Mike, especially, and Peter, right from the get-go, were playing and writing and singing, especially Mike. And then I kind of got into it later. It was actually Nesmith that kind of encouraged me, because I had written a few songs, not a lot. I wasn't prolific, but he said, "You should write some songs for these albums." And I said, "Well, why?" He says, "Because that's where the money is." And boy, he was right.
So Kathy Meddings, we only have time for a couple more questions. We appreciate everyone. Miss Knievel and Tracy Dunn with another Lady Lizzie. A lot of great questions. I have one from Kathy Meddings on Twitter. She asks, the song Ryu Chu, if I'm right, the Christmas tradition of you guys. What made you guys pick that song? She said it's a beautiful song.
Ryu Chu?
Yeah.
It's called Ryu Chu. An old Castilian, I don't know what you call it. It's obviously some Gothic, kind of song. And it was brought to us by, I believe it was Chip Douglas, one of our producers, and Henry Dills, who had heard it. And I think it was being sung around town in folk groups and stuff. I just remember loving the idea of doing it. And they said, "Well, you're going to have to, work at this. You're going to have to rehearse it, because we want to do it on the Christmas episode, and we want you to do it live on film. We're not going to pre-record it like a music video, and like everybody does music videos where you pre-record or the song's already recorded and you sing along. We want you to do this on the set with all the people from the show, but do it live." And we rehearsed a lot on that song, because it was 4 parts and very intricate harmonies and stuff. And what you see on the show is live. And I've done it since in my Christmas show with the members of my band. It's a wonderful, wonderful tune. And I do it on an album called Remember that I released. And I do it a cappella. And I did like 30 layered vocals on it. If you get a chance to listen to that, it's pretty cool.
There's a version you can hear on YouTube, I know, of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the exact one. So last thing we'll ask, now you guys have had, obviously, sadly, we've lost Peter and Davey over the years, but you guys have had several reunions, some with all four of you, some with two or three of you. What are some memories of the reunions that you guys have done, the reunion tours, and just getting back together at times that you have?
I'm told I had a great time. There's touring is for me, again, just speaking personally, touring for me is difficult. I don't travel well. I never have. I'm like a fine wine. I should be lying in a cellar on my side in the dark, not traveling. So that is a challenge for me. The shows are the easy part. And we have a saying, which for me is very true. They pay us to travel. We sing for free. So the things that I remember are just hanging out with people. I don't remember places at all, because I landed at an airport. I get in a limo. I go to the hotel. I go to the venue. I go back in the limo. I go back to the hotel. I go back to the airport. So to me, that is a blur. It just is me. I don't remember much of any of that. But I remember people that I meet along the way. Yeah.
And yet the only thing stopping you from having a tour this year is coronavirus. You had a tour scheduled. You've got scheduled next year. Folks can go to MickyDolenz.com, look at the whole schedule. Vancouver, all up and down the West Coast. So hopefully we're out of this by March and folks can actually see you live in person singing. Don't forget, if you want those live video chats, autographs, recorded videos, those are still available for folks. Micky, it's been a pleasure for me, and I'm sure for the audience. They've been very lively, and thank you so much for being with us today. And any last things that you want to leave us with here today?
No, well, yes. I mean, I guess, given the circumstances these days, everybody please be safe. Practice all that social distancing, and please wear a mask if you go out, and do whatever you can, and let's try to knock this thing on the head, and hopefully we'll see you out there on the road. Be safe and take care of yourself and everybody else around you.
Fans of the great Micky Dolenz, don't forget, live video chats are going to be on Thursday. So if you're interested in those, go to wizardworldvirtual.com. Autographs, recorded videos, drumsticks, all kinds of different items and things you can see right there on wizardworldvirtual.com. Don't forget, coming up this week, wizardworldvirtual.com, we get kicked off right away on Tuesday. Vampire Diaries will be in the early afternoon, followed by Blake Jameson, a pop culture artist who I'm sure you'll be very interested in learning about his techniques and what he's doing with Topps, reimagining baseball cards. We have The Nanny coming up on Thursday. Fran Drescher is among the stars of that show who'll be with us on Thursday. Whiz Quiz Thursday evening, which is a fun, nerdy trivia that you'll really get into. X-Men animated series. We'll have some of the guests from that series, both a writer and also some of the voice actors. Kato Roki, speaking of voice, speaking of singing, not exactly Micky Dolenz, but you can be Micky Dolenz as well, singing. Maybe you'll sing I'm a Believer. Maybe you'll sing Last Train to Clarksville and channel Micky in that one on Friday night. And Saturday, it's the Lego Masters. We have some folks from that reality series. So once again, for Micky Dolenz, I'm Jerry Milani. Thanks for joining us today on Wizard World Virtual Experiences. We'll see you again soon.